Good evening, everybody. My name is Tom Bromley. I'm the Head of Learning here at Reedsy, and I am the instructor on our How to Write a Novel course. And on this special presentation, which we're showing on YouTube, we're giving you a sample of one of the classes that we run on the course. So each Monday evening, UK time, we have a live masterclass. Sometimes these are set masterclasses. Sometimes we are doing live editing sessions. We look at the work of the different students, and sometimes, as with this particular example, we have a guest author along, and we've had a number of different guest authors on over the course. And tonight, for the session we're recording, we've got Anna Vaught, who's the author of 8 books, but most recently a book called The Alchemy, which is described as a guide to gentle productivity for writers. So lots of fascinating advice and tips for writers, particularly when you're in difficulty or get stuck. So we're going to chat to Anna about that this evening. And then a little bit later on as well, I'm going to talk a little bit about the course. If you enjoyed the session or are interested in taking the How to Write a Novel course, we've got cohorts starting in January, in February and in April. So I will give a little presentation about that as well. So do hang on and have a look at that if you're interested. But in the meantime, sit back, enjoy the session, and hopefully get a feel for what our writing course is like. And I'm delighted this evening that we've got Anna Vaught with us. Anna is the author of 8 books. Is that right, Anna?
Yeah, number 9 out next year.
And number 9 out next year. But this year, actually, you've had, well, this, the last few months, so this fantastic novel, The Zebra and Lord Jones, and this guide to writing, which I want to talk about, particularly The Alchemy, that was published a couple of months ago and was described as a guide to gentle productivity for writers. And I'm going to just read a very little bit from the foreword, which I think kind of sums up a little bit about what the book is about. Which says, Anna Vaught's The Alchemy is the indispensable guide for anyone who is a writer, is struggling to write, or wants to write. Compassionate, patient, and liberatingly honest, Vaught takes you by the hand and shows you how life's obstacles, struggles, and traumas are the gateways to creative possibilities, to new ways of seeing and new ways of writing. Wow. And it's a fantastic book, Anna. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, and congratulations on the book. I think those of you doing the course will know that I don't use that many how-to books on the course, partly because I'm always generally slightly skeptical of people telling you of a specific way to write, and also because I believe that the books are the best teachers. And actually, the few I do like, which I do mention, Patricia Highsmith's Plotting and Writing Suspense Fiction, which is about suspense fiction particularly, but actually I think she's very generous about writing, and also Release the Bats by DBC Pierre, which she describes as a pocket guide to writing your way out of it, which is also a fantastic book. But this, I would say, if you were looking for, a last-minute Christmas present kind of idea, if you want someone else, this would be a kind of great book to have in there. So Anna, I think, as you said, this is your 8th book, and I wondered why you decided to write about writing at this particular juncture.
Hello everybody. I can't see you, but I know you're there. I decided I wanted to write the guide that I needed, because I'm actually quite a new writer, I've only actually been writing for about 6.5 years. I just sort of hit the ground running, and not running very elegantly. And I didn't know what I was doing. And I was managing work and family, additional needs in my offspring, and chronic illness. And there was very little support for me. So when I'd written these books and discovered that I had some idea how I was going to do it, I thought, well, I'll write that book. I need it. And that's why I did it at that point. Also, I wrote it in very difficult circumstances during a very difficult year, which I won't go into. And in a way, maybe that was the best time to write it, because I wanted to show people what was possible, even when you think it's not, and even without a room of your own, or, even in really painful and difficult situations. I wanted to say that even when your back's against the wall, you can create something So a piece of commentary I've had on the book says that it's a good book for all creators or for making anything. And that'd be lovely. Not just books, but, you know, anything creative.
I think you write fantastically well about writing, and I always think that it's one of those things. Writing about writing is really hard. I think. I mean, writing itself is kind of hard enough, but I think writing is writing about writing is hard. And as Aniko says, I really needed to hear that, and I think that is the case for so many writers, that you feel, I don't know, you need to be perfect, or you need the perfect setup. In order to be able to write.
No, you don't. Oh, sorry, I interrupted. Were you about to say more about the perfect setup that you don't? Oh, well, I was just going to say, everybody, that, and I think this applies to life, doesn't it? With anything, you know, don't compare and despair. For a start, you know, not everybody does have this perfect, you know, bougie little writing shed down the end of the garden. So don't worry about Instagram and all that. You know, the thing is, work with what you have, because you can write, if you learn to focus and work in a way that is doable for you, you can write just as brilliant a book sitting at the kitchen table with a load of mess around you. You learn. That's what I had to do. I was saying to Tom just before we came on tonight, I move itinerantly round our house, you know, round people and pets and you know, projects and so on, and I've managed to do all my books that way. So just relax about not having the perfect setup. Just don't wait until you think, you know, my health is absolutely straight, my finances are absolutely straight, I've found the perfect relationship, or whatever, I need to get everything calm. Just start now. What's the worst that can happen? Honestly.
Well, I always think, yeah, and I think there's always that phrase of, you know, about life happens when you're making other plans, and I think that's, you know, it's true with writing as well.
John Lennon.
Yes.
Yeah.
There is. Yeah. There's a fantastic story about Joe Nesbo, the Scandinavian crime writer, who created his perfect writing room. So he was successful, he was doing well, and so he made this room in his house. He got the best desk he could get, the best chair ergonomically, got a sort of coffee machine, amazing, you know, computer, sound system, everything. He couldn't write in it. He created this thing, and he ended up, he had to write.
He had performance anxiety.
You know? in the cafe round the corner. He'd spent all this money, and he thought, this will be it, I'll write my next book, and he simply couldn't write in there. But there was something about the ambience, or, you know, the feel of the cafe where it clicked. And I think, you know, I think with writing, I know as well, it's very easy to put off that moment where you think, oh, well, you know, it'll be clear next week and I'll get this headspace.
I think that's deferring things to fate. I really do, because, you know, your roof might fall off next week, or, you know, what you just don't know. So, you know, it's a source of joy, writing. I would want it to be that way for everybody here. So if you can remove that central anxiety of things I need to have, you're off to a very good start. That's not to say it will be easy, because if you are sad, or you are poorly, or you are a carer, or, you know, whatever difficult situations you might have, and, you know, lots of people do, they don't necessarily tell us, so we don't know. But whatever difficult situation you might have, you know, there can be a way to do things. It just might be in small increments. I don't want to talk too much, because I might be using up all the things that Tom's going to ask me later, and then we'll have awkward silences, which I shall fill with talking a lot.
No, that's absolutely fine. No, you go ahead. And I think you're right with those challenges. And there's a couple of chapters in the book. There's one where you talk about where there's shit, there's gold, and turning this millstone. And I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about what those chapters and those ideas are about.
So, where there's shit, there's gold, excuse my language, it was a phrase from my maternal grandmother, very Welsh, could just about read, had a very hard life, very, very many children, and didn't like my grandfather. Anyway, that's another story. But she had a tremendous imagination and a tremendously kind of upbeat way of looking at the world, and she's responsible for my interest in stories. So I got the phrase from her, and it's really about, you know, liberating. I suppose it's a sort of version, a rather more dramatic version of looking on the bright side, or, you know, every cloud has a silver lining. It's just that, a bit more profane. It's a way of thinking that perhaps if you have a difficult experience or tough things happen, or something complicated happens to you which you're finding it hard to unpack and decode, then maybe there's some really brilliant material in there. I mean, if you think just, you know, in everyday life, it's always when bad things happen that you get better anecdotes. Do you know what I mean? I mean, like The Perfect Family Christmas. Where is the story in that? It's dead, isn't it? As a short story, or, you know, stories that you'll tell in years to come. So it is about finding material in what you have, including the bad. I mean, I had a complicated and very dysfunctional background, but I tried to mine a lot of it for not to repeat the stories, but perhaps for things I learned and the way that my imagination learned to tell stories and learned to sort of see things in a different way. And there's another thing, I think I pushed in that chapter, a thing about, you know, the millstone becoming a star, which is something I go on about. If you can just find in whatever your experience is a nugget of truth or interest, build it into a story. It doesn't have to be the event, but it might be a feeling or a thought process that was connected with that. So that even when you're in the shit, you can find gold. See, that's the idea. And I think it's a good policy to operate.
It's a really good policy. And is that something in terms of your own writing? Are you making notes contemporaneously, thinking,
oh,
constantly, write later?
Yes, all the time. And that one of the things in the Alchemy is that, you know, like when you're trying to, you know, I'm just going to be really blunt about it, when you're trying to do an actual job. So, sorry, Tom. Sorry, everybody. But, you know, like, it's a bit hard to make lots of money from writing. But there are ways, which I'm sure we'll get covered at some point. But, you know, when you're holding down a job, when you're doing all these other things, don't forget that when you're noticing things and, you know, your imagination is sort of freewheeling and you're thinking about things that happen to you and noticing what's around you, you're still creating, you're still maybe making a book. So yes, I do it all the time. And I do revisit a lot of things that have happened to me, and, you know, weird stuff. And I notice oddity and unusual things and incongruous things all the time. I think that was something I just learned very early, and I've just never stopped. It's just that it took me a while to have the confidence to write it all down. You know,
I think those notebooks of ideas are kind of gold dust. I always think, and I probably mentioned in the groups before that I remember once going to talk with Will Self, who had this theory where if you didn't write an idea down in 5 minutes, you'd forget it. And I don't know if that's true or not, but I think it's quite good practice to kind of go into.
Yeah, I do. And, you know, if you think about it, I mean, ideally write it down, at the very least think about it, but always keep a notebook with you. Have something shoved in your bag, because it's amazing what you can use and reuse. There's so much interest, you know. And I'm always saying this to mentees and to students. I think that for me, a book generally starts with a question, you know, and ends with my having answered it, ish, sometimes. And so I think when you're out and about, ask questions about things. You know, notice people, notice what they do, notice how peculiar people are. Like in the supermarket, don't get in too close, because that's a bit stalky. But watch and listen. You know, people have the funniest conversations, and watch their body language and overhear funny things on phones. People are just brilliant. You just need to watch them.
Yeah, I was thinking.
Well, I was just going to say, like, there's a thing that I said in the book where I was walking through the town nearest to me, And there was a fella who just drove through the middle of the town in the day. He was wearing a three-piece suit, but he was driving a tractor. Couldn't explain it. But I wanted to know everything about how that came to be. That's the more extreme end, but, you know. Or the couple arguing over dog food in Asda the other day. I was fascinated by the display of passive aggressiveness on both sides. It was gripping. It was better than telly. Anyway.
It's good stuff. Yeah, notebooks. I think cafe watching is always amazing.
Always, yes.
You know,
yeah,
definitely worth doing. So, Wendy is saying that she's got a blank notepad with pen by her bedside table. That's good to know. That's exactly.
If you wake in the night, write something down, or write. I often, when I go to bed, I do have a notebook as well, Wendy, by the bed. I've got these pens all over the house in little pots. Look, I've got these. They're all over the place. Can you see? And just in case, like I want to write with a particular pen. And when I go to bed at night, I always just jot down a few thoughts. You know, sometimes just words or an idea that I might want to explore. And sometimes it's about the book that I've got on the go, but sometimes it's just an idea I'm interested in, and nothing is wasted. All those things you jot down. Even
and
books. Go on.
Sorry, I was going to ask you. You said a moment ago that quite often your novels or your books start with a question.
Yeah.
And I wondered if you could just give us, are those big questions? Are they little questions? What form do those questions come in?
They can be either. I mean, the novel that came out in September, so The Zebra and Lord Jones, I suppose that the question in the end was, can he ever be happy? But it started because I saw a picture. I was looking up something to do with it was some history essay that I was doing, and I happened to see a picture of London Zoo during the Blitz, and it said the animals don't mind the raids. And I thought, what? And there was a picture of the zebra and a picture of the zebra enclosure that actually got split open during the Blitz, and it began with a true story. And so it started with a question because I saw a photograph of the zebra that had escaped and gone running during the Blitz when the enclosure suffered a direct hit, and it went running. So the question was, what happened to the zebra? Actually, in real life, the zebra was recaptured because it only got between Regent's Park and Camden, which is not very far. But in my book, it went somewhere else. So a small question, a big question. Always, yes. The stimulus might be a different question from where the book starts, though, which is what I was long-windedly trying to say with Zebra. Saving Lucia, which is the novel that came out in 2020, started again with a photograph because I saw a picture of an elderly woman back to the camera in the most beautiful pose. Look her up, Violet Gibson feeding the birds. You can see the picture, Violet Gibson feeding the birds. And she was covered in birds. And my question was, who is that woman? And then my next question was, why is she covered in birds? And the question in the book then became, what did Violet Gibson do next? And that's the question in the book, because she turned out not just to be any old person feeding the birds in a garden. She was an aristocrat who tried to kill Mussolini. Didn't see that coming from the photograph, but that's who she was. That's who the book's about. Violet Gibson, would-be assassin of Mussolini in 1926.
Wow.
So yeah, they may be big, they may be little, but they'll develop. Just start, you know. Can be anything. Doesn't have to be lofty. Just needs to be interesting enough for you.
I think that's a really good point. I mean, there's a note here from David who says he says that's the biggest thing they taught in journalism school. Your piece should be answering one big overarching question. If a part does not help to answer that question, it should be taken out. I mean, I always find it fascinating with And I always found it quite empowering, actually, when I hear writers say that rather than having started with this, you know, this amazing concept or this, you know, this enormous structure and plan, there's just
Mm.
this little fragment that's intriguing. That's like,
Yes.
it's like a pulling of a little thread, and then the
Yes.
novel kind of grows out from that.
I think so. I think so. I was reading, it was a little interview, I think it was, hang on, Michael Ondaatje, and he says, he just starts with a little question. And it might be, the example he gives, actually, and this is quite a strange one, is he gives the idea of a plane crash and there's one survivor. Just a thought that comes to him, not necessarily anything he's seen, and it could be quite a peculiar little thought, really, but such are human beings. And then he thinks, why was he the survivor? Who was that man? Who does he know? Who is connected with him? And, you know, and you just sort of keep on pushing forward on that question until things begin to crystallize, I suppose. But yeah, so just a little thread. And like I say, it need not be lofty, because
No,
it's all
not at all.
impelling, I would say.
Well, I remember reading an interview with Jennifer Egan,
Mm.
who wrote the visit from the Goon Squad,
Mm.
and that whole big book, which is over 30 years and has all these different bits, and there's a section in PowerPoint. But the whole novel started because she saw that someone had left their wallet behind at in a in a lavatories, and she
Mm.
thought, oh, I wonder what happened if I stole that, and that was,
Yes.
you know, that was it. That was, and this whole enormous book came out from this one little tiny fragment.
Well, the new novel, which is called All the Days I Did Not Live. You heard it here first, everybody. I haven't sold it to anybody because I'm, well, another story, between agents, as they say. So what I was going to tell you was that somebody said to me, we were talking about mobiles, and somebody said to me, they asked the question, what happens to a mobile when it's no longer used? What happens to that number? And I thought, ooh, I don't know. You know, if somebody dies or somebody gives up the phone, well, the answer is it's reassigned, generally after 6 months. And I just had this idea of, shall we say, a phone answered by an unexpected person. And it sort of grew from there. It's not a particularly fantastical idea, but it's the question of who's making the call and who's answering. And in the case of this book that I've begun to unravel, like it already existed, I'm just sort of taking dictation, it's sort of out there in the ether. It's all about magical thinking. You know, how far would you take your pretense that somebody still existed?
So I'm just going to take a few minutes to talk about our How to Write a Novel course, and give you some thoughts about why you might want to take a writing course more generally, and why this particular writing course might be right for you in particular. So let's start with the most basic question in this presentation, which is why take a writing course at all? Because obviously you can just sit down. If you're interested in writing a book, there's nothing to stop you just getting on and getting stuck in and writing it. So what can you gain and benefit from taking a writing course? And with my experience, I would say that there's three things in particular to look out for when thinking about taking a writing course. The first of those is the learning element. So it's understanding the principles behind writing. So finding a course where you might know little bits about description or dialogue or plot, but hopefully a good writing course should give you all the basics you need to know to help you kind of write and finish your book. Secondly, which I think is really, really important with courses, is that element of accountability. It's a lot harder, I think, to write a book by yourself. And I know from different people I've talked to who've done courses with me, how useful and important those kind of deadlines are. They really help you to focus the mind and help you to progress and get to the end of the book. It's very, very easy. And I've had this before with students on shorter courses where the course finishes and then their impetus for carrying on writing finishes. They miss the deadlines that they've had during the course. And the third element, which I also think is really, really important, which is allied to that, is that question of community. Writing is by nature quite individual. It's quite an isolating process. So having fellow writers who you can share, not just in terms of getting feedback, although that's incredibly useful and important, but actually, when things aren't going well, or you want support, or enthusiasm or encouragement, having that tribe of people there, your writing tribe, is really, really important and really helpful. Again, helping you get to the end. And as I say here, it's possible to write without a course, but it tends to be a longer, slower, harder process. And I've written I Know here. From my own experience with my first novel, it took me 5 years to write, and I wrote that by myself without having gone on a course. And I think if I had, for all those reasons I've outlined above, it would have been a much quicker and probably better process as well. So why take a writing course with me in particular? Who am I? You may well be thinking. I'll give you a little bit of detail about myself here, kind of 3 areas I suppose I've worked in over the years. So firstly, I've got a lot of publishing experience. So I've worked in publishing myself for almost 25 years. I feel a bit old as I say that. But over that time, I have worked with a whole range of writers. And in fact, I've commissioned and edited and worked on over 100 titles during that time. So I've got that experience of the industry, how that works, what that's like. What books need to go and get published. But I'm also a writer myself, so I have that writing side. So I've written and co-written 12 books of both fiction and non-fiction of my own. And over the last decade, I've also worked as a ghostwriter. And here I've ghostwritten 15 books, including prize winners and bestsellers over that time. Those are mainly celebrity autobiography and memoir. And I would tell you who those people were, but then I have to kill you, and that's not much fun. So I will spare you that on this particular occasion. And then the third kind of string to this particular bow is my teaching experience. So I've taught novel writing for about a decade now, primarily online. I really like it as a setup. I think it works really well in kind of teaching writing. And I've taught thousands of students actually in different courses. But on my main novel courses, I've had over 30 of those have gone on to get published by the the main kind of big publishers, and many more have gone on to be kind of self-published as well. And if this slide will flick on, I will show you some examples of that. Okay, here we go. Some examples of some of my students who've gone on to get published. So Joanna Cannon, who was a literary writer, her debut novel, The Trouble with Goats and Sheep, I watched from the start, and when that was published here in the UK, that became the best-selling literary debut of the year. Deborah Masson, who's a crime writer up in Scotland, her first book, which again I worked with, and she wrote on the course, and I mentored her a little bit afterwards as well. Hold Your Tongue was published, critically acclaimed crime book, and went on to win the crime debut of the year at the Bloody Scotland Crime Festival. Asia Mackay, who is a comic writer, has written a fantastic book called Killing It, the first in a series of books about a spy stroke new mother who returns to work having had a child and tries to juggle both these kind of elements of her life. And she was the runner-up in the Comedy Women in Print Awards for kind of best novel. And then finally, most recently, A.Y. Chow, who is a fantasy writer whose debut novel Shanghai Immortal was published in the UK and US this summer, and that was a #1 Sunday Times bestseller on release. So just an example of some of the writers who I've worked with over the years who've gone on to get published, and all of those writers there started in exactly the same position as you are now, with an idea and some hope, and that led on to success. So what kind of writing courses are there? I just want to talk you through the options, because you might be thinking, okay, well, maybe I should take a writing course, but they feel quite different to me. And I think that's true. And I want to talk you through kind of 3 different types. I think most writing courses come down to, and the first of these are your academic courses, so the MFAs or MAs as they're called here in the UK, and these are academic degrees with everything that kind of comes with that. So they're not short courses; they're long. Sometimes they're 12 months, sometimes they're kind of 2 or 3 years, and inevitably over that period of time, you're going to get a lot of teaching as a result. A lot of these courses are fantastic. I did an MA in creative writing myself, kind of many years ago, and you get a lot of benefits from the courses. They tend to be taught in small groups. You will get tutor support and feedback, and all of this is great and useful, but it comes with a price tag attached. So the average cost, according to figures that I researched in the US, courses will cost between $11,000 and $36,000, depending whether it's a private or a public university. And that's a big commitment and a big investment. And in my experience, it's not necessarily giving you a better chance of getting published at the end of it. If you look at the number of people who get published off these courses compared to some of the courses I'm going to talk about in a minute, they're pretty similar. So you will get that academic qualification, you will get that space to write. The good courses here are amazing, but as I say, they're not cheap at the same time. At the opposite end of the spectrum, there is what I call self-paced courses. So these are courses like Masterclass, I think would be the most kind of obvious example, where you're working through the material by yourself. So rather than being in a group or chatting with other students, you're given the content or the videos, whatever it is, and you're left to kind of work through that at your own pace. That works well and extremely well for some people. You can fit it around whatever it is you're doing. But for those reasons that I outlined earlier, you don't get that group support or feedback and the benefits that you would get from that as a result. And you're getting a lot less in the way of teaching as well. So an average course on Masterclass would be about 3 hours. So it's not a huge amount of teaching you're getting. You are getting fantastic tutors. I remember watching Salman Rushdie, for example, on Masterclass, which was a fascinating class. But you're only getting 2 to 3 hours of their time, and you're not getting any interaction with the tutors and the writers as a result. But they're a lot cheaper, perhaps unsurprisingly. So they will come in at around, I think it's $120 for a year subscription to Masterclass. And then in a sort of Goldilocks way, we've had the ones, very expensive and very cheap, and then we've got the ones in the middle, which I call online kind of novel courses. And there's a whole group of these out there. These are commercial, industry-led courses, and they tend to be taught in groups or cohorts. So you get that community element that you get on an MFA, but you don't get so much on a self-paced course. The courses are structured rather than being self-paced, so you have the element of deadlines and accountability there, and it tends to be focused on the writing itself. So you're getting that learning element, but you're not getting that academic element as well. And I remember when I did my MA, we had to write essays on kind of particular topics. I think I did stuff on the history of writing about the landscape, for example, which was fascinating and really interesting, but didn't actually help me in telling me or showing me how to write particularly. And these courses, price-wise, are in between those two extremes. So they tend to cost, depending on the course, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a second, between $1,000 and $6,000. So they are more expensive than self-paced courses, but at the same time, a lot cheaper than if you wanted to think about taking an MFA or an MA. And this is just summarizing all this detail here. So if you're interested in this, do pause the screen and have a look. And you can see the kind of the spread of the teaching. So an MFA/MA, so I plucked one at random as I was kind of searching on the internet from Cardiff Metropolitan University in Wales. On that, you get around 140 hours of teaching. On the Reedsy course, which I'm going to talk about, you get 35 hours of teaching. And on the self-paced courses, you get 3 hours of teaching. And so there is an equivalence. You're getting more teaching depending on how much more you pay. And I think with all of this, quite often with writing, it's working out kind of what works for you, what your budget is, what you can afford. But yes, so we are very much in the middle way here at Reedsy. So how does our Reedsy course work in terms of this setup? Okay, so our course is 101 days. And we set that up over around 15 themed weeks. It's actually 1 week of prep, then it's 14 full weeks, and then it's half a week to get you to 101 days specifically. And in the setup, we give you a new video lesson on that week's topic, kind of Monday to Friday. These videos are all kind of 10 to 15 minutes long. And those are backed up by a further sort of full lesson to give you a deep dive into each topic. So if you do that as well, that should take you about another 45 minutes or so. So you can either do a 50-minute video or an hour's learning each day. And then each weekend we have a fantastic kind of panel authors who I interviewed who talk around and about kind of different writing themes and topics. And the idea of the course, and the reason we've chosen the course for this length, is we want you to try and get to the end of the first draft by the end of the course. And to do that, we sort of calculated that an average kind of debut novel would be around sort of 75,000 words. So that requires you to write 5,000 words or so a week, 1,000 words a day if you're a Monday to Friday person, or maybe a splurge of the weekend if you're that kind of person. And that feels quite a lot, but it's less, for example, and if you do NaNoWriMo, where you're meant to write 50,000 words in 4 weeks. So I think it's achievable and possible, and I know from the different people who've had already taken the course that they've generally managed to kind of get there or thereabouts. And we're balancing out. We try to balance out the amount of teaching with the space to give you to write the book at the same time. Here are the themes that we focus on. So it's a little bit like the structure of the book. We begin with beginnings. We have a middle section on middles, and we do endings at the end. In the first of the course, we look at more sort of core elements of writing, things like character and plot and description and dialogue. And then we build that out in the second half by looking more at kind of writing skills and techniques, kind of further plot skills, elements of doubling up, kind of chapters, things like that. To build out your kind of knowledge as writing, and hopefully you'll be kind of learning stuff as you need it as you go through the book is the idea. And you can see there on week 2 we have what we call our secret source week, which I won't reveal now, but there's a specific elements I think are kind of crucial and important to writing, and it will set you off on the right foot when you begin your book. As I said earlier, we have a weekly author panel, a fantastic array of writers here, and just some examples here you can see. So we've got some crime writers, we've got some literary writers, we've got some fantasy writers, children's writers, kind of horror writers, thriller writers, a real mix of stuff. Try to choose a selection of different authors with different experiences, both in terms of kind of writing and publishing, and fascinating. Really, really interesting when we recorded the videos, and I think that the students have found their input kind of really, really useful. And as well as those authors, we then have a weekly live session. So we have a masterclass each Monday. Some of these sessions are straight masterclasses, some of them are live editing sessions, and some of them we have guest authors along here. And as you can see, we've had people like Ashley Tate and kind of Claire Fuller and Barney Norris, Avais Khan. Again, a kind of real mixture of writers, but it's an opportunity to hear these writers talk about their experiences and kind of ask some questions as well. And again, that goes down really, really well with the students. And I should just say as well that compared to the self-paced courses, you're not getting any live sessions, whereas here we're giving you, a regular session on the catch-up once a week. So the big question with this, I suppose, with all these kind of stuff, is how much does the Reedsy course cost? So at the moment, the course costs $1,249 if you pose a single payment, but you can spread that out over 4 payments, which costs slightly more, but that's $349. And that works out at $12.36 a day. And you might be thinking, is that a lot? Is that a little? And I just want to give you a little bit of a comparison here to show you how the Reedsy course compares to some of the other ones on the market. So these are some of the biggest kind of novel writing courses out there, all really, really good courses in different ways. So Jericho Writers have an ultimate writing course, which takes 12 months and costs around $6,000. The Faber Academy, their online course takes 6 months and that costs $3,500. Curtis Brown is a 3-month course, $2,500. Novelry, 90 days, kind of $1,750. So the total price of the Reedsy is cheaper than those. And if you look at the cost per day, they're all sort of roughly similar, but the Reedsy one does come in a little bit less. And that's partly because we wanted to make this course kind of accessible. These courses aren't cheap, so we've tried to come up with a setup and a system that will hopefully make it as possible for as many people as possible to take the course. These are a few testimonials from some of our students who took the course kind of early on. I don't like reading out quotes and stuff I do, so I will just leave you there to look at it. But as you can see there, people have kind of really enjoyed the course, a lot to get out of it. And I think all of these students, the feedback we generally get is it's helped them, it's supported them, and it's got them to where they want to be, which is the next stage, which is to have that full manuscript, that full draft to go away and work with and develop still further. So just to sum up there, the write your first draft in 101 days is the basic of the course. You're getting those key elements for that cost, the learning, the community and accountability. And there's the price there. And we've got courses starting in January, in February and April. So whenever you feel is right for you, we'd love to have you along and join us. Thank you very much for listening. If you've got any questions, always do feel free to pop me a line. Drop me a line at Reedsy Learning, and I will come back and answer any questions. And in terms of the writing of these books, and once you've got this initial image or this question or this idea, something like The Zebra and Lord Jones, which is a historical novel, how much planning or researching are you doing before you get stuck in and write?
Well, I do. I read quite a lot. I mean, Zebra and Lord Jones. I mean, I would say I am above all a magical realist, but I do have a strong interest in history. So I will do quite a lot of reading around, and I'll read biographies and I'll read history. So I would have read several books before I started in earnest on writing a novel. But once I'm underway, I'm a bit of a pantser, really, I have to say. I just go, until that's me, the Frankendraft. I don't know why I'm coming up with that noise, but that's what I do. I just write, and I just knock myself out and splurge, and God, it's florid. It's the Frankendraft, you called it, and otherwise known as the shit first draft. But where there's shit, there's gold, remember. So there'll be some good stuff in there, but I just get that all done, and then the real work begins. And then I'll read some more, and I'll think some more, and it will probably change dramatically. But I do quite a lot of reading, and I do something else also and I think it's kind of pertinent to the alchemy and the whole spirit of the thing, which is that I sit with the characters, like I invite them to my table. A good thing to do if you're really stuck and you feel like you can't give life to your characters in the books that you're writing, is to do that, to sit with them but put them in ordinary situations or unexpected in situations. What do they have for Christmas? What do they like to have for pudding? These are very simple things, but they reveal things about the interior lives of your characters. So, a lot of sitting, it's like they come into your house. I do think also that once you start writing, it's almost sort of supernatural, really. Once you start writing and your characters turn up, they tend to do whatever the hell they like. It's like they take on a life of their own, I've always found. I don't know what you think about that, Tom, but that's how it seems to me.
Well, I think they should do, and generally they surprise you. And I always think because that's your subconscious probably having worked stuff out, but hasn't come to the fore yet. So that then you get this surprise, but then you go back and look at what you've done, and it all links up and kind of makes sense. And as a pantser, kind of plot wise, do you use a similar kind of strategy in terms of characters, or do you do a little bit more sitting and thinking before you start?
I think, well, plot, this is a terrible admission, isn't it? Plot is not my strong point, everybody. I think, and I am working on it because I know, I need to do more. But I think I spend more time sitting with characters than I do, at least initially, thinking about plot. But I do know where I want to end up. That's the thing. So I've got my initial question, my initial ideas. I do have a very clear idea of some ideas that I want to explore, even in the general mess. And that might, that'll get added to and it'll get amplified. And I sometimes write my last paragraph very early on. It's the bit in the middle that's difficult.
So you sort of know where you're heading or where you want to
I
finish
think,
up,
yeah.
but you
Yeah,
don't know how you're going to get there.
not yet. No, it's a
And
wild ride, isn't it?
it's a really interesting. Well, I think it's a really interesting approach, and I've certainly had that with other writers I've talked to, where they do get something about writing a later scene and having something to work towards.
Yeah, yeah,
I think
yeah.
it's a really good technique, actually.
Hmm.
And one of the things you talk about in the Alchemy is the importance of thinking, actually. And I wonder if you could say a little bit more about this. So this wonderful phrase where you say something like, is that the bulk of your book is
Yeah.
thinking and pondering
Yes, pondering.
rather than writing. I wonder if you just elaborate a little bit what you mean by that, because I think it's fascinating.
Well, I suppose it's partly what I was saying about characters before. You know, really sit with them, interview them, ask them questions. And just to extend that a bit, try and, you know, like daydream about the atmosphere of your book, things that are in your book. Listen to things, music, or, you know, things on Audible, what else, you know, just things that seem to you to be connected to it. Really situate yourself in it. Also, really think and cogitate and ruminate and all those things about the key concepts that you want to explore. You know, what do they mean to you? What questions do you want to ask? So, for example, in The Zebra and Lord Jones, I spent a long time thinking about what it means not to understand what love is, that you only understand love in terms of what it's not, which is how Lord Jones, you know, experiences life. And I sat there and I pondered that and I pondered that. And then I started thinking about my family and, you know, on both sides of my family, I'm first generation middle class, but I was thinking about, you know, what changes in terms of culture and literature when, you know, two big rural working class families like in mine, they kind of, you know, start living a different life, or they, you know, whatever, you know, what's lost and what's gained. So, you know, in social mobility, as you might call it. And I just started, I suppose what I mean is I think and I think and I think about all aspects of the book and the questions it asks, the story it tells, and the things that the things that the book makes me feel or want to know more about. So sit with it. And also ask questions. You know, when you read, really spend some time thinking about the concepts that you've been reading on. Like, you know, just to go back to saving the 2020 book, Saving Lucia, I thought for a long time about just the huge number of people who were in the old lunatic asylums in the 19th century, because that's partly where the book is. We don't even have all the data. What happened to those women? You know, it's not all very cheerful, but just put yourself in your book and think, and know that is as much writing, well, I would say, as actually writing the thing, you know, inhabiting it.
I think that's right. So I think quite often when people talk about writing, or you feel how you're achieving, you're doing it with a word count. You're saying, "Oh, I've written, you know, X hundred words today.
Yeah.
I've achieved." And if you're spending that writing time thinking, you don't have anything physical necessarily to show for it, but actually those couple of hours thinking are as important as actually having spent that time getting the words down. And I suppose it's getting your head around that and understanding that is as much part of the writing process as you say as the writing itself.
And I think also I wouldn't want anybody. I mean, this if this works for you, then it works for you. Wonderful, but you know, this concept that you can't be all this stuff. Oh, you can only be a writer if, to all of that. You know, you must write every day, or you're not a writer. Well, that's not doable for anybody, for everybody. It simply isn't. You know, because you're working, or because you're tired, or because, you know, there's too much going on, or just because you just don't feel like it. You don't work that way, and that's okay. I've written, you know, I've read rather, you know, really brilliant work where people have just written bits on their phone on the tube. Obviously, it's not ideal, but gradually, you see, with thinking time and some editing time, you know, gradually it coheres.
And you find a way. I remember Joanna Cannon, who I taught years ago, whose first book, The Trouble with Ghosts and Sheep, was a sort of huge bestseller when it came out, and I watched that from the start. But she was a doctor, and she wrote. She wrote in the car park at lunchtime. She went and sat in the car, and you know, and that's where she wrote.
Well, I can share with you, without sharing the circumstances, that the last, not so much the Alchemy, but the Zebra and Jones, was a lot of that was written in car parks as well, and in hospital waiting rooms, and in the early hours of the morning. It wasn't a particularly pretty way to write a book, but it's what there was on offer, you know, because it was a difficult period. It still exists. Look, here it is. Look, it's the book written at very strange circumstances.
But I think I write in cars. I mean, yeah, my daughter, my daughters do sports, so you know, you take them to training, and then you're sat in the car park for an hour. So you're, you know, it's an odd place to write, cars, but actually you know, as you say, you make make the most of what you can.
Yeah, always work with what you have.
Very much so.
Yes.
So Anna, you said that although you've written kind of 8 books and you've got a 9th coming out next year, that you haven't actually been writing for that long. So I wondered why and how you got into writing in the first place.
Well, I've always been a huge bookworm, so I've always read a lot. And then my background, you know, I was one of these annoying children that read before school. Do you know what I mean? I was very naughty in school, so I didn't make the best. That's another story. Actually, no, it's not another story. It's central to the story, because all those adventures are ploughed in. Nothing's wasted, see. So my background is actually English teaching, so secondary English teaching. That's where I came from first of all. So I always loved it. And I only didn't write because I sort of had that idea that writing was for the other people. I don't know if anybody here suffers from imposter syndrome. You know, you could raise your hand. Well, I can't see you, but Tom can. Where you know, it's a thing that the other people do. Then I had a particularly difficult time with 2 of mine with school and, you know, additional needs and just the sort of challenge of that. And I came back really furious about that one day, and I was cooking, I think I was frying bacon, and I was in the kitchen, or no, I was mopping. That was it. I was mopping, and I suddenly thought, sod this, I'm going to start a book now. I think I had a moment of rage where I just thought, right, I'm going to do this now. And I haven't stopped. So that was 2016, very late 2015. And then that first book was published. It was a really quick turnaround. It was a small press. That first book was published in 2016. I haven't stopped. In addition to the ones that have been published, I've also had, there are 3 in drawers. So I think it's like, I know it sounds like a lot, because people are always like, ooh, you're so productive. But I suppose I am. But I think it's as if a lot of it was already there waiting to come out, if that makes any sense. It was just the confidence to start. And it was actually a moment of rage rather than happiness. But, you know, it got it going. So,
yeah. I mean, you mentioned imposter syndrome there.
Yes.
And also that challenge of having the confidence to start writing. And I think sometimes with writing, it's how you give yourself kind of validation.
Yes.
To write, and I think with imposter syndrome, I mean, I think it's something that, I mean, I've written, you know, plenty of books, and I don't think it never really goes away. It's something I think that you learn to manage rather than you get published and then you deal with it.
Yeah, you deal with it, but also I also think, I think doubt is a function of both compassion and intellect. I mean, who are the people? I was saying this to my mentees, actually. Who are the people who break stuff? Is it the people who doubt themselves? The people who are reckless with ideas and money and other people. Not that I'm referring to the current government. And if you voted for them, obviously that's fine. But, people who are really arrogant and really sure of themselves, I don't think, to me, that's a lack. That's a sort of a slight lack of self-reflection. And like I say, of compassion and of that kind of intellectual element, which makes you wonder about your own ability. It makes you self-reflect. The key is not to let it eviscerate you, So you learn to deal with it. I think everybody has it, of feeling slightly embarrassed or, oh God, it's rubbish, or it's not as good as this and that. And there will come some point when you're writing a book as well, where you just go, who did I think I was, even attempting this? But I think everybody thinks that, where they go, what have I done? So I wasn't up to the task.
And how do you deal with those moments when you face them?
Oh, cup of tea and an emergency biscuit, usually. And then I just think, I'll plough on then. I mean, I've just started. I mean, Tom knows this. I've just started. And to me, I mean, this is peak imposter syndrome moment, but I'm pushing on through. I have started what's known as a PhD by published works, which is to say I'm doing a doctorate on my own books. Now it's so exciting, but at the same time, I'm slightly mortified that I should even be allowed to do such a thing. I don't know if any of you think this is funny, but I'm just, but it's because it's about self-reflection, and your own books are assessed as part of the doctorate. But it feels a funny thing for me to be doing. But it's lovely. I think, have your emergency biscuit, or just reassure yourself with the thought that it's just normal to feel this way. And probably healthy, as long as it doesn't get too all-consuming.
Please do put your thoughts on this, and also your questions in the chat as well, and I'll put them to Anna. But I think, I absolutely agree. I always think the thing with doubt is, if you haven't got it as a writer, then you're probably not doing it right. You don't have the requisite level of sensitivity. And as you say, the writers always worry me, the ones who are very confident about their ability, which is tends to be a red flag for me.
I think so. Yes. Yeah, and like I say, if you think of doubt as a function of intellect, perhaps that will help. But like I also said at the beginning, compare and despair. Just be you. There is no other you. So write as you. Painful as that may be sometimes. Be confident as you can, but know that it's normal to feel vulnerable as well.
And I think that's a big part of writing. And one of the bits I really enjoyed in the book is that you talk about having a moment where it's sort of almost finding your kind of writing tribe. So actually, I think you posted on, I think, social media, and asked for advice or support. And I wonder if you just tell us a little bit about that, because actually I found the response fascinating.
Oh well, yeah. You see, because I as I said before, I sort of run headlong and not very elegantly into things. So I entered publishing like a bull in a china shop that was a bull with its shoes on the wrong feet or something. Sorry, that's a terrible metaphor, but it wasn't an elegant thing. And I didn't know anybody, and I didn't really know anything about how any of it would work. And I did wobble. So I just went on Twitter, or X as it's now known, but nobody calls it. And I said, does anybody want to join or form a writing support group with me? And that's all I did. And I just got, but also, I think those things just grow organically, and people have sort of gone in and out of that group as we've all done different things. So it's not sort of necessarily meeting people, although this might be the right thing for you, where you are critiquing one another's work. It can just be a support network. Where you talk about, opportunities, how you're feeling about it. There's a thorny issue in a book that you're writing, or you want to get an agent, or should you enter this competition, or, just there's a myriad questions that you might be pondering. And there's also, I think if anybody who's here tonight, if any of you, you might be a carer, that you're an unpaid carer looking after somebody who really needs you. You might be managing a chronic illness. I think that there are people out there who, there are so many people out there having that experience. I don't know if you're aware, but actually the last book that I had published wasn't The Alchemy. It's been a busy old autumn, book called The Cure, which is a literary prize that I started for writer carers. A whole group of people have found one another because of that prize, and they all work together now. Just special interests, Don't be shy. Just say, does anybody fancy being in a supportive writing group with me?
Yeah, sorry, I was going to say, one of the things we try and do on the course is, you have that possibility to share work. You've got that community, but I think, writing by its nature is quite an isolating activity. And there are moments where you need support, or you need second opinions, or you need someone to tell you that you're not, you don't need to doubt yourself. You've got stuff here that you should be kind of pleased with and to carry on.
I think there's a strong mental health element that's involved there because of the potential isolation. Writing is something you tend to do very well, and you do very much on your own. The publishing end of it, less so, because that's very much a sort of a team effort. But I think it can really help to blunt your isolation in whatever way you can, and it can be online. It doesn't have to be a group in person, and it can take whatever form you like, which can be doing a course on Reedsy, or anything that you might do in the future that does put you together with people who will understand the particular challenges as well as the joys of this sort of caper, really.
You mentioned publishing there and other people being involved, and there's a question from Karen who's asking, how do you handle editing? Is this something
I love it.
That's the next question.
No, I do. Yeah.
Why do you love it?
Because I love. Say, Karen, this is a bit of a non-technical answer. I absolutely love crossing things out. Is that a bit odd? No, I do. Do you self-editing or editing later on? Do you mean? Let's do self-editing. How do I handle it? Well, that's a very big question. Do you mean how do I handle it emotionally, or what do I do when I edit, or a bit of both?
I suspect it's a bit of both.
Bit of both. Okay, let's bit of both. If this is not the answer you were looking for, Karen, I'll tell you a bit more later on. So I do my terrible first draft, and then I reread it and I make lots of notes. I don't do any of this on spreadsheets. I do a print off, and I write in, look, these lovely felt pens. But you do it however you like it. And I just note things, and then I go through it again. And on the second draft, when I've written that, I do a new plot summary for myself. And I also look at each chapter, and I do 2 bubbles. And one bubble is where I say to myself, what happens in this chapter? And another bubble is where I say, what's changed or what's developed? Because however literary your novel, or how beautifully, detailed it is, you still need some form of action to propel you forward, or your reader's going to doze off. So that's important. So that is what I do, and I keep doing that until I feel it's refined enough, and then it will go to an editor who might, in the early stage, be your agent if you're working with an agent, or whoever it might be in the publishing house, and then it starts all over again. So I would say your novel is somewhere in the region of, I don't know, 70% done when it goes to an editor, something like that. Some people would say less, maybe more, but I love the whole process of it. even when it's brutal. I don't know, it's quite cathartic. It's like, I think it's like wrestling with something. So I find it exciting. Don't be daunted. But I tell you what I do think. I think that editing is often harder than writing. For me.
And harder in what kind of way?
Well, I suppose in the sense of it being more technical. I feel like I'm really wrestling with it more. I'm really having to perfect it more. Whereas in the early draft, or possibly in the first 2 drafts, it is more, splurging. I don't aim for any neatness. I don't edit as I go along, ever. Some people do. You might want to do that. It might feel better for you. But yeah, I think I find that more strenuous, the editing, because to me, that's the real shaping. It may be different for you.
And have you ever had issues with, or working with a particular editor or publisher where you've had differences of opinions about how the book should go?
Particularly. I mean, there was a thing with Saving Lucia, which was a bit of a wrangle, and it was my fault really for making it such a complicated book, but where we had characters who were inhabiting other characters, and we needed to work out what to do with speech punctuation. And the suggestion was made that the speech punctuation came out altogether, so it has no speech punctuation at all, which to me as an English teacher was a bit hideous. But when I looked at it, I felt it worked. I'm sure that not everybody agreed, because you're never going to please everybody. So sometimes it's worth kind of suspending judgment just to see. But no, I love it. There will always be minor quibbles, of course there will. Because editing, there needs to be a little bit of dialogue in editing, but no, I would say I've been lucky.
I want to ask a couple of questions about how you look after yourself as a writer. So one of the authors that we have author videos at the weekend. We had a panel of authors talking about their work, and one writer, Cecile, was talking about, because she was writing about quite dark stuff.
Yeah.
So actually, she sort of listened to quite a lot of ABBA, I think, if I remember rightly.
Oh.
She needed to do something to kind of have a release. And I wonder how, if you're writing about stuff that's quite serious or personal or intense, how do you look after yourself as a writer and as a person as you're working through this material?
No, lots of jokes. I like a naff playlist. Do you know what you need? If you're writing dark things, you need a solid disco playlist. And so, I mean, actually, ABBA is great. Yeah, so I think music is a big thing. Just something and things that take you out of your head. I mean, I'm incredibly boringly clean living. I mean, just to the point of just appalling dullness, really. So I meditate and things like that as well. Bit of gentle exercise. But I think, if you just need to get out of your own head a bit, because what you don't want to do is be so much in your head that, that people who are spending a lot of time on their own, there is a risk in mental health terms that the thoughts inside their head become their whole view of the world. And you do need to guard against that, which is where your playlist comes in. Or just, just during the day, if you're working. I mean, I do lots of different things as well. So, it's, it varies depending on what you do. Something that's a contrast, something that's fun, and something that's funny, something that's trivial as well. Daft things. Pictures of cats on Instagram. Whatever, I don't know, whatever is good. Oh, and read different things as well. If you're writing, in a particular style, just, keep your reading really varied and do some more, do some more sort of lightweight reading or some really, really different non-fiction reading. I think that's good as well.
And how do you look after yourself as well in terms of not beating yourself up about, I don't know. So sometimes I think with writers, they think, well, by this point I should have written, 30,000 words. I've only written 15. I'm a failure. I'm not producing. I mean, how do you guard against that? Because it's very easy to slip into that.
Oh no! Well, I'll tell you about that. With me, I've been I have been productive. That's one thing I can say. And actually, some people say, "Oh, you're very productive," and I feel like they don't mean it's a compliment. I don't know. I tell you, I am quite hard on myself about where I think I should be in terms of profile. Well, I should. And so, do you know what I do? I don't look at stuff. That's how I look after myself. So, like, I was not going to look at any of these best books of 2023. I just thought, not looking at that. Not look. Am I on it? Don't know. Not going to look. So I ignore things. I switch. I get off social media. I think it helps to remember that, and I'm going to have to use the word journey. I do apologize for using this word, but there are no two journeys which are the same in publishing. And there's a different set of circumstances for everybody, interpersonal things, interplay of life and books and style and market, huge amount of luck in terms of, if and when your book gets placed. And if you remember that, I think that can be helpful. Try not to get jealous and remember to congratulate other people as well, because it's nice to take joy in what other people are doing. You don't know what their circumstances are. So, yeah, so cheerfulness, understanding that everybody's experience is going to be unique because of a unique set of circumstances. And I try and, I do try and think of how far I've come or other things, because we have a negativity bias, don't we? Because human beings, I don't know if you've noticed, they're a bit daft, really. But they don't notice all the wonderful things and I speak for myself here, that all the wonderful things that are right in front of them. They just notice the one thing that they did wrong. And don't move your goalposts either. As soon as you've done something, don't start going, oh, but I could have, or yes, but I didn't, because you'll suck the very joy out of it. Again, speaking from experience, don't do that.
It's very easy. I know if you get a review and the review is all glowing and there's one negative comment in the review.
However, yes,
the writerly instinct is that's the one you'll focus on.
I tell you what's quite fun, actually, and perhaps this is a bit bitchy, but I'm going to suggest it anyway, is to look at really bad reviews of other people's work. Is that terrible? Because look, my point being, everybody has them. And also some of them are really, really funny. Some of the, I'm talking about, people have always said to me, do not go on Goodreads and Amazon, because those people are ruthless on those sites, particularly Goodreads. But, and make yourself laugh as well. Don't take yourself too seriously. That helps. Obviously, books are the most important thing ever. But don't take yourself too seriously, because you need to enjoy this as well. It's a cool thing.
I did once put someone who put a negative review of one of my books on Amazon in the next book. It was quite not in a big way.
I do think that. We see that's the other thing. Also, if somebody's really horrible to you, you can just write a sort of composite version of them with other people and just have them, just give them a terrible accident in your next book. Isn't that awful? But you can have some fun with that, even just entertaining the thought. Yeah.
And one of the things you talk about in the Alchemy is you talk about, which we talked about the course before, the importance of kind of reading your material out loud, which is obviously really useful in terms of getting a sense of the rhythm and the cadence of the sentences and all that kind of stuff. But the bit I found really interesting, which I hadn't thought about before, was you talking about as you're reading it aloud, that sense of moving at the same time as well. Yeah.
I think that, not everybody is going to be able to read their work aloud for various reasons. So don't panic when I say this, because, obviously there are widgets and you can do things on Scrivener and this, that, and the other. And there's lots of read loud facilities. But if you possibly can, read your work aloud. And I was going to say earlier that, say on the third draft of the novel, I will read the whole thing aloud and I will feel it, but I kind of move my body to it, so I feel it very intensely. And try it. I suppose it's a bit sort of like yoga, really, in some ways. But just if you can read it aloud and see what happens to your body and the gestures you want to make and the stances you want to make, stand up and do it. And maybe you'll feel things and learn things when you do that. It's just really exciting, and it helps you to really to see the shape of your book and of your sentences, as well as, you know, spotting the typos. It's the best way.
And when you say you're moving, do you mean you're sort of acting it out, or are you kind of...
No, I just might sway, or I can feel it in my wrists, or I might just alter my stance in some way. And it's like I'm here. I've always noticed this. There's a quality in the books. I don't know whether it's my idiom or sort of an Anglo-Welsh thing, or I just don't know. I can't quite pin it down. But I use a lot of refrains. There's a lot of musicality. So it's almost like a really slow dance for me. I don't know whether that would be the same for you when you're reading your books aloud, but for everybody here. But try. See where you can feel it. Can you feel it vibrating in your hands? And, you know, just explore that bit. Sounds a bit weird, but just try, experiment, see what comes out.
I think that's good advice, and I think that point that you make there, what we talked about it earlier, that, you know, as a writer, working out what works for you is so important, because there is no one way of writing, and you know, the number of authors we've interviewed for this course, I'm sure the students can see that, you know, how different everybody approaches it, and it's finding your own sweet spot of how much you want to plan or pants, and you know, when and where and however you write, and finding out that the formula that works for you at that particular moment, because even that can then change during the book as well.
Exactly, it may change. No, I like that. So I hope that's reassuring to everybody. So I think lots of people say it, don't they?
We're going to finish up in a second, but I just want to ask a little bit about procrastination. So there's a section in the book where you've asked different people, you know, questions about writing and how they overcome challenges, and one of the people that comes back says that for them, in terms of getting over procrastination, they go and write somewhere else. So they struggle to write at home, but if they go and write in a cafe and they're not being distracted and they're there for a purpose, that sort of forces them to write. And I just wondered, do you have challenges with procrastination? And if you do, how do you deal with those as a writer?
To be honest, I don't tend to. Why? I don't know. I don't think it's any superior skill on my part. I just don't tend to. But that is one thing that I might do. I think one good thing is to go to a busy place. You know, it doesn't really matter, sort of an interchange of some sort, maybe a station or something. If I ever get stuck and I can't carry on with a paragraph or start a paragraph, I tend to do what I used to do with, you know, secondary age students who were just kind of paralyzed with anxiety about starting to write. And I doodle, I cross hatch, you know, where you draw lines and you draw lines against them, and then I start writing words, and then I start forming a sentence or writing down questions. It's like physical memory, and it seems to sort of oil things a bit. But that's as far as I ever go. I'm pretty good. So I suppose I'm talking about writer's block, really. But yeah, I think for procrastination, don't beat yourself up about it. You could just be thinking instead of writing. But I think one of the best things is to just go and do something else, go and write somewhere else. And if you really can't get started, if you're writing a novel, then write a different thing for a bit. I mean, I write across genres and forms. Write the beginning of a short story if you can, or just a little bit of non-fiction, or, you know, write down an opinion on something you feel strongly about, and that will get you going gradually, and have faith that it will return. You know, this wanting to get started.
Thank you as well. Yeah, thank you. It's been a brilliant hour. Do check out the Alchemy in particular. And thank you for all your comments and questions this evening. Anna, thank you again. It's been a
Pleasure.
brilliant session. Thank you, everybody. Lovely to see you all. Happy writing. Good luck with your writing for this week. And I'll see you all again very soon. Thank you.